Hello and welcome to Close to Walk Catholic Communications. I'm Father Bayer, your host. And you've heard me talk about this before, that here in the United States, we have over 5,000 animal shelters, each one of them holding 100 plus places to rescue an animal. We've all seen on television a commercial that seems to last 3 or 4 minutes about the puppy with the broken paw, and no animal deserves to live like this. And for $19 a month, you can rescue all these animals. I know even in South Louisiana now, instead of Mardi Gras, they have Mardi Paws, where they dress up their dogs and they have a parade of dressed up dogs. Now, for all you PETA people out there, I love puppies and kittens. That's not what I'm talking about. But at the same time, in the United States, where we have 5,000 plus animal shelters, each holding 100 beds or 100 places, in the United States, we have a grand total of 538 beds for people, humans, who are being trafficked into human slavery. Almost 90% of them are being trafficked into the sex trade. You think about this. You think about the absolute devaluation of human life, where we've gotten to the point that we no longer see a human as someone made in the image and likeness of God, but we've unfortunately devalued human life to the point that we see it as a matter of profit, pleasure, or possession. It's a worldwide problem. It's very much a problem here. It's very much a problem in your hometown and your surroundings. But today, I want to ask the question, how do we get here? How do we get to the point that we really, in all honesty, you can go to jail for harming an animal, but you can abort a full-term child? Beam me up, Scotty. Tell me what's wrong with this picture. And we didn't get here today. It's been long coming that we deal with this devaluation of human life. We've guised it under the protection of human rights. We've called it women's health care. Well, what do you call selling a 12-year-old girl? How are you going to spin that one? And I have someone here who's much wiser and has just a great perspective on how we're slouching to a place we really don't want to be. So it's my pleasure to welcome, and all of you will know him from EWTN, Father Mitch Pacwa. Father Mitch, welcome.
Good to see you, Father Bayer. How you doing?
I'm good, Father Mitch, but I'm just as upset as you are about the fact that, and not only are we here, but people want to act like it doesn't exist. Mm-hmm. The devaluation of human life. And look, this is in our lifetime. This is in our lifetime. You and I didn't grow up like this. Our parents let us go out and play after the work was done, but they didn't worry about finding us in body bags along a highway somewheres. And, you know, we could go to a friend's house and not have to worry if someone was going to abuse. Hey, it's so different. Father Mitch, how do we get here?
Completely different. There's a process throughout human history of dehumanizing groups. For instance, even in some of the very simple tribal societies, you'll find that the name of the tribe in their own language means the human beings. If you are not in their tribe, you are therefore not a human being. And that kind of logic is seen in African tribes, Native American tribes, and so on. It's not universal, but it's common. And it indicates a way that human beings think. On one hand, they know we have no right to take away freedom from another human being. We have no right to sell them as property. But if I dehumanize them, then it's okay. We put them into another category instead of identifying with them. People have done this in war over the centuries.
Joseph Goebbels called the Jewish people vermin and rats.
Well, I'll get to the modern times, but think back in the Roman Empire. If you lost a war and did not die in battle, you would be made a slave. And as it turns out, by the time of Christ and the empire's development, a third of the empire was enslaved. A third of the population. They dehumanized them from other places. Now, even still, they did allow for slaves to make some money and buy their freedom. They could do that. And it is, in some ways, no accident that the United States was started in trying to imitate the Roman Republic. So we called ourselves a democratic republic. We used Roman architecture for our Capitol building and lots of other buildings in Washington. And we modeled our government on the checks and balances that existed in the days of the Roman Republic. And we also included slavery within the Constitution. This is somewhat odd to me because as the church became stronger, it became more involved in ending slavery. A lot of people don't realize this. It was a lot of Christians who would liberate their own slaves or buy other Christians and then give them their freedom.
Josephine Bakhita being one.
Well, she's one in modern times.
Sure.
But this, I'm thinking of the ancient church. And then once the Emperor Constantine legalized Christianity, it's important to note, he did not make Christianity the official religion of the empire. He simply decriminalized it. Nero made it a crime in 65, and then in 313, Constantine made it legal to be a Christian. Once that happened, you have people like St. John Chrysostom, who wrote to the imperial court, "Who are you to enslave anyone that Jesus Christ has set free from sin and death?" That kind of logic increasingly permeated the church, and the church not only put an end to the games of the gladiators, it also worked toward putting an end to slavery. And by the church had enough power that by the year 800, the Pope could write to noblemen in Corsica or Sardinia saying, you must not allow any slave trade or slave ownership. You must eliminate it. The bishops of England, when England became Christian, worked to make slavery illegal in England. And slavery had become illegal throughout Europe until the 1400s. And then in the 1400s, the Portuguese began to enslave people in the Canary Islands. And this is early, this is 1420s. And immediately, Pope Martin V sent a letter saying, stop it. And then it continued. Pope Eugene IV put it under automatic excommunication to enslave anybody with no possibility of forgiveness until you set the slave free and returned all their property to them. This was church legislation, and that excommunication for enslaving people was repeated every century thereafter until slavery finally came to an end in the Christian West in 1880, when the Empire of Brazil was finally convinced by Pope Leo XIII to make slavery illegal. Along the way, people like Paul III made not only the excommunication repeated in 1537, but he also used as his logic that this right to freedom is inherent in the person. They have intellect and free will, and you have no right to enslave anybody. Now, this was constant teaching by the popes until slavery came to an end. But the folks did not listen. Oh, the Pope is in Rome. He doesn't understand economics. He doesn't know how to run a plantation. He doesn't understand that the Native Americans cannot work in the cotton fields. We need to enslave Africans. They can handle the heat and they can handle the work. And so this is an economic necessity the Pope just doesn't understand. A very interesting logic connected with the attitude of a lot of Catholics on abortion today. The Pope is in Rome, he's an old guy, doesn't understand. The same kind of logic against the excommunication for enslavement of people as well as for killing people.
Were you excommunicated if you were a slave owner in this country?
This is great question. The wording.
We've only got 2 minutes, so let's.
Yeah, the wording of the legislation was you could not make somebody a slave or engage in the slave trade. That was automatic. But then there were bishops in this country who made excuses to President Polk when Pope Gregory XVI reiterated the condemnation. They said, oh, that just applies to taking new slaves. It's okay if you already own them. Because Polk was worried about, starting...
Grandfathering clause.
Yeah, right. And so it's that kind of mealy-mouthed attitude towards papal teaching that you see among some people in regard to our politicians on abortion and others, and the way some theologians treat them. That kind of disregard went on. And then in the 20th century, it was kicked up when the state did the enslavement. In the case of the National Socialism, the Third Reich under Hitler, and communism. For the sake of the state, you can enslave people. Tens of millions were enslaved. Two of my cousins had to do slave labor for the National Socialists. Wow. They were in prison camps, one in Czechoslovakia, one in Germany. Well, they were taken from their homes in our village in Poland over to Czechoslovakia and then went to Germany.
That devaluation obviously permeates ourselves today. Yep. We're just much more politically correct about identifying it.
Yep.
Father Mitch, stay with us. We're going to be back in just a moment. Hi, I'm Father Jeff Bae from Closer Walk Catholic Communications. Thank you for being here today, and a special thanks for the support that you give us. First of all, your prayerful support we so desperately need, and also your financial support. We are donor-driven, and that is what keeps us on the air today. As you well know, the truth is in great demand and in very short supply, and mainstream media is not going to bring you the truth of the Gospels of our Lord Jesus Christ because that's not socially acceptable and it's not politically correct. Certainly we all realize that when this life journey's over, we don't stand before the Supreme Court, we stand before the throne of God. Therefore, with great clarity and great charity, to pronounce the truth of the gospel is important. Your prayers, your financial support enables us to do that. So we thank you, and may God bring you closer in your walk with the Lord each day. God bless you. Hello, and welcome back to Close Walk Catholic Communications. I'm Father Bae, your host, and we're glad you can join us. And again, we're talking about how do we get here? That we know of between 45 and 48 million slaves worldwide? This is the 20th century. We're the hashtag Me Too. If someone gets touched inappropriately, it's going to be in the middle of the news tomorrow. Yet we're selling 45 to 48 million people worldwide, and we act like it doesn't exist, and it's not here, or they must not be American children, all of which is incorrect. But we have with us today Father Mitch Pacwa, and all of you in the Catholic world know Father Mitch from EWTN, but we're dealing with the fact that, you know, we're here. It's here. It's us. It's our people. How did we get here? Father Mitch, you gave us a great understanding of
Dehumanization and slavery.
the dehumanization and slavery, and also what are some of the more modern
Yeah, let me bring
events?
us up to the present time, because there are two kinds of issues that go on with the dehumanization. On one hand, there is pseudoscience that tries to say certain groups are subhuman. Now, this was the issue in the Dred Scott decision, that where a man who had gone to a free state, escaped from slavery, and he
But he was black. He was African-American.
Oh, he's African American. And the Supreme Court had decreed that no, he is still property, no matter what state he's in. And secondly, African originated people are inherently inferior, and they ought to be enslaved. They don't have a right to freedom. This became Supreme Court decision, and therefore considered law. When Lincoln and Douglas debated, Douglas and the Democrats supported the Supreme Court and said, this is the Supreme Court decision. Blacks are inherently inferior, and you watch and see. Mr. Lincoln's going to try to say that they have the same rights as a white man. And that's exactly what Lincoln did say on the basis of the Declaration of Independence, that you have unalienable rights of life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness from
My
your
God.
Creator. And this is something that belongs whether you're of African origin or not. This, of course, led to our Civil War, but also in the post-war period, the rise of Jim Crow laws were meant to keep these inferior people in an inferior status. This went on, and we saw lots of rights being taken away. And the pseudoscience came with Charles Darwin. Darwin, in his second book, his first book, The Origin of the Species, talks about the principles of evolution. His second book, The Descent of Man, includes in there that the African people are a species that is not fully human. They are a species in between the ape and the humans, that is, the white humans. And therefore, they need to be bred out like you would an inferior breed of cattle. That's his statement.
That would be very interesting for everyone who claims evolution, that this is our gospel we live by.
Right.
Say, well, okay, let's take Charles Darwin's idea.
It's immoral to do so, but
Exactly.
the problem is when that was translated into German before the First World War,
Yep.
it was used by the National Socialist Party, the Third Reich, as a principle for dehumanizing Jews and gypsies. Gypsies were subhumans.
And homosexuals.
Jews were subhuman. And homosexuals, even though they were Aryan, they would still be subhuman.
And birth defects.
And people with birth defects could not contribute, and they might bring bad well, they didn't even know about genes yet. They didn't have that science
Bad
yet.
breeding.
Yeah, but there'd be bad breeding, so they would eliminate them, and also the cost. That kind of dehumanization led to the death of 10 million people in the Third Reich. 6 million Jews, 4 million others, plus the battle deaths were led up to 55 million. But then you see the same principle in the communist countries. People who are not committed to communism and to the state, they have to be eliminated because they're subhuman, and you can enslave them in Siberia. And I urge people to read what that was like. Take a look at the Gulag Archipelago by Solzhenitsyn, and read that, or One Day in the Life of Ivan Denisovich. Short book about just what that day was like, and then read from a Catholic perspective, With God in Russia, a Jesuit priest who was in the same kind of camp.
With God in Russia?
Yeah, fantastic book.
Name of the
by
author?
Ciszek, Father Walter Ciszek, Ciszek. And in fact, his cause is up for toward beatification.
All right. And
Now, when we get to America, so we have to keep in mind the 20th century is filled with people who, very importantly, rejected morality as an objective reality. They rejected it. So
all
that
relative.
they became relativists. When you read Mein Kampf, he promotes relativism. In communist ideology, relativism to the goals of the state is the way that it works. In America, we saw not only that blacks were people kept under, and Asians, because they're inferior, but also in the mindset of a lot of people and a lot of laws. But then we see that as the right to privacy gets developed in the Supreme Court, that allows children in the womb to be killed. They're dismembered and killed. Once you make that, it's very interesting. That happened in 73, correct?
Correct.
Roe versus Wade. Within the first year after Roe v. Wade, the murder rate for children 5 and under increased by 100% in a year. Well, I didn't get to abort them, so I'll kill them now. Became the mentality. That is a dehumanization of children.
The fetal mass.
Exactly.
It's not a human being, it's a fetal mass.
And we see, for instance, that in the state of New York and there's a proposal for the state
Vermont.
of Virginia,
It's in
Vermont,
it's legal.
Rhode Island, if you have a child who survives an abortion, you should still kill it. Even though Roe versus Wade says that once the child is out of the womb, for sure it's a human. Now they're changing that again and dehumanizing children further. Once you allow that kind of dehumanization, it's easy to take their life. There goes the first unalienable right. Then, of course, it's easy to take away their freedom. The second unalienable right. And the third one, pursuit of happiness. No, you're there for my happiness. This all becomes totally logical once you dehumanize.
Absolutely. Once you're at that point, let's go to all the people who can't live in society. They're not functional. They're in mental institutions, and they bring nothing to the state except cost. And so, they should have been aborted. But since we didn't, since we can now kill living people, now we can do that. The other thing is, and I think that's the mentality for the Mitch that we're dealing with, how we sell people. And you've seen the abortion clinic, videos of someone, if you can't make $52,000 a week selling baby parts, and they're advertising fresh livers, fresh kidneys, and all that sort of stuff. Well, I'll tell you what, someone who sells a whole 12-year-old and lets them live may look like Mother Teresa. They may look like the compassionate one. At least I'm not cutting them up in pieces and selling them.
But I'm still selling them as slaves.
Exactly.
Let me add one other component. It's also related to the abortion issue, horribly. In China and India, there is elective abortion primarily oriented towards girls.
Yes.
Because the Chinese only allow one child. And in India, they don't want girls because you have to pay for the dowry. So the result is, at this point, there are 45 million males in India for whom there's no woman to marry. It's over 40 million in China. There is no female for them to marry.
So the same-sex attraction.
There's a lot of that, but also the need for sex slavery. That you can't marry a girl because she's not there.
Not available.
And so enslaved women and children are primary because they assume they don't have a sexually transmitted disease yet. And therefore, children have a primary economic value in the sex slave trade because you assume you won't get any kind of disease and that you don't have to worry about them having a child and so on.
That's why we start selling them at the age of 5.
Exactly.
And in this so-called dark web, you can go online and they have sex tourism packages.
Yep.
You can go online, I want a 5-year-old little boy, a 5-year-old little girl, I want them for 3 days, and you can bargain from 5 to 8, you're allowed to do this. From 8 to 12, you're allowed to do that. After the age of 12, there's nothing you can't do to a child.
Yep.
And and we talk about we're an evolved, civilized civilization, and this is who we are. And we play #MeToo, and we tumble all these people in places of power because they touched someone or said somebody, and we're ignoring this.
Yep.
And we're talking about reparation for slavery, and we're enslaving people still.
I would say this
Last
too.
thought.
Yeah, last thought, real quickly. The only thing that stops the slave tourism is that they get caught and they can be put in jail by our own ICE agents in this country. When they get home, they go to jail. And it's fear of punishment that stops them. And we have to be vigilant in enforcing the laws that exist against slavery, including the 13th Amendment.
And that's what our conference is about.
And this is what we're trying to deal with.
We thank you for being with us. May each day bring you closer in your walk with the Lord. God bless you.